Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. After the fourth Red Bull 1-2 in just 5 races so far this season, they are currently on course to post over 1,000 points in the Constructors' Championship, which would blow the records absolutely out of the water. George Russell reckons though their car is even better than they are letting on, reckoning they're sandbagging a bit with their engine modes and actually have even more in the tank than they already do. If other teams can start making some steps to catch up, will they just push further ahead if they're actually not running their engine as high as they could? Very much interested to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Firstly, just wanted to comment on the Grand Prix because, look, at the end of the day, it was a Verstappen 1-2. Well, it was a Red Bull 1-2. Verstappen P1 this occasion. Dominated the race. Phenomenal drive from Verstappen. Perez, when Verstappen's on it, Perez just can't live with him, right? And I think that really put to bed any doubt as to who's going to win the Drivers' Championship. The only way Perez can win it, I think, is try and win a third of the races. Hope Verstappen has a couple of DNFs in there. Maybe he's got a chance, but on that evidence, it's not going to happen. The race itself, there was actually quite a lot of action, right? There was no DNFs though, no mistakes really made by the drivers. Only, I think, the 14th time in F1 history that has happened. But there was some good battles right throughout the field. Hamilton and Russell making some great passes actually to come through. The DRS didn't seem to affect that too much actually. So certainly on that kind of, the first DRS straight, I think shortening it was okay, or maybe on the backside it should have stayed as it was. But regardless, it was interesting, but it still feels somewhat flat, right? I mean, they try and hype up the Grand Prix with these pre-race driver introductions. I know that many outside of the States thought this was unimaginably I had to put it on mute. I couldn't watch it because it was just too bad. The drivers have varying opinions on this. George Russell says it was distracting because of the timing involved, and he says, look, personally, it's not for me. Hamilton quite enjoyed it, but still, I'm not so convinced about it. Rumour has it, though, that they're going to do this at another 7 races this season. I thought this was just going to be like a Miami thing, right? It's like, whatever, you go to the States, you're going to have the glitz, it is what it is, right? And sometimes it's kind of funny, but I thought that was going to be a US Grand Prix type thing. They might do it COTA, they'll certainly do something like that in Las Vegas at the end of the year, but apparently they're going to do it at another, 5 races in addition to those 2 I just mentioned. So, imagine turning up to Spa, where you're there for the racing, and they're doing that stuff. It's like, I don't think we need it, right? I'm here for the racing, but you guys might disagree in the comments below. And obviously, the lack of a fight between different teams for first place in the race is making things boring, but I will say that there was good action on track yesterday, but the race still felt somewhat underwhelming, and I think a massive reason as to why is the tyres right now. There's just something, why is it always a one-stop? For some reason, Pirelli choose these compounds where the hard tyres can last the entire race. There's, the entire middle stint is just management of the tyres because they know they can handle a one-stop as long as they don't push the tyres too hard. The drivers never want to battle really because they know that if they do battle, they might torch their tyres and they can't afford to if it's a one-stop because those tyres have got to get to the end of the race. And then when Verstappen's coming through because his car's so much faster, no one defends from him because there's no point. So he just makes passes super easily. And okay, some of his passes were impressive. The double overtake was fantastic, but I mean, still, it's just underwhelming, right? And I think a large part of the reason is based on the tyre compounds. And I think this is incredible, actually. F1 Data Analysis looks into this and finds that the hard tyres had basically 0 drop-off in performance. Like, the entire race, they had the same performance the entire time and were actually even faster than the mediums. For the first part of the stint, especially on higher fuel loads, the medium was a slower tyre than the hard and degraded more. So what are Pirelli playing at, right? And that's one of the key reasons why the hard tyres don't degrade. The medium isn't really that good of a race tyre, and this seems to be the thing every weekend. So I think that is one of the key reasons making these races underwhelming, is that everyone's on the same strategy. The only alteration is you can start on the hard, go hard, medium, or you can go medium, hard. Those are your options. So something most certainly to think about there in terms of how the rest of the season might progress. But let's talk Ferrari quickly. They had a shocker. Obviously, Hamilton made his way through, got Leclerc at the end as well. Leclerc had a bit of a stinker, as did Sainz, to be honest, right? He could never even get close to Alonso. He ended up P5 in the Grand Prix after Russell got him as well. And the rumour has it that Ferrari have now figured out, finally, that their car isn't good enough and they've got to change the concept. Even Leclerc was mentioning that his car was understeering and oversteering in the race. There was just no balance at all over a race distance. It's funny how close they can get in qualifying and then they're just absolutely nowhere near in the race pace. It's remarkable. This reminds, of course, many of the 2014 Ferrari, right, which Fernando Alonso drove. That was, it just understeered, oversteered all over the shop, and Leclerc was having a very hard time with it. Could barely even keep past a Haas, right? I mean, he overtook Magnussen and then got overtaken again. It was a, disaster for Leclerc. And as he says, we have a car that's incredibly difficult to take to the limit, and Sainz echoes a similar thing. Rumour has it that that Ferrari floor upgrade that was getting, well, I've mentioned it before, whenever Ferrari upgrade their floor, it doesn't do much. Same thing in France last year. That apparently was worth 1/10 a lap, that Ferrari floor upgrade, so hasn't really done much. And the Red Bull upgrades in Baku were worth 3/10, so they're stretching their advantage even further. And apparently they finally figured out that this car concept isn't going to cut it. It's clear the Red Bull approach is the fastest, and they're apparently for Barcelona going to revise their side pod design, maximising the flow towards the diffuser ramp, so some thoughts on the floor, and change a bit around the rear suspension. So Ferrari have to change things and get things right quickly, because if they don't, with the cost cap in play, next season is going to be sacrificed as well. Similar story here for Mercedes. What we're doing is we're working towards a new bodywork, we're introducing a new floor, and we're doing the new front suspension, and that's pretty large operation. So that's what they're doing for Imola, right? The new floor, new suspension, new bodywork, which will include side pods, maybe not at Imola, but maybe slightly afterwards. But obviously a lot of changes they're making. They would want to do more if Mercedes had the budget for it, but they don't. He reckons they're going to understand as a result of this update why their car is currently so poisonous to drive. And in the race, it's not too bad. The Mercedes is again more competitive, especially relative to Ferrari in the race than it was before. But in qualifying, they can't seem to quite get it right to the limit where they need it. And even in race pace, right? I mean, a P4, P6 was a great drive from both drivers. Russell and Hamilton did wonders, I thought, with the car yesterday, had great races themselves, made some great passes, given what was available with the machinery they had. But, it's not enough, right? I mean, that's obviously way off. It's a good result for Mercedes, all things considered. But to think about Mercedes, P4, P6 was a good result on the day, like how far they have fallen in recent memory, right? And Christian Horner makes a fair and interesting point. 5 races, 5 wins, plus the sprint race, 4 1-2s, never had a start like this. We've made a normal step over the winter. Where did our rivals go? Where did Ferrari and Mercedes go? So you've got to give Red Bull obviously a lot of credit. They have made what is pretty much a flawless car. The only issues that car has is the occasional gremlins in the gearbox that Verstappen complains about, and maybe they are beatable in qualifying, right? That's the only thing. They're unbeatable in the race. Absolutely. Their car is pretty damn reliable we've seen so far this season. It's great in all corner types. Its straight line speed, its DRS is mega. There are just no weaknesses, apart from sometimes you can beat it in qualifying if you really try. But even then, only Charles Leclerc at Baku has managed that so far this season. So fundamentally, it's on the other teams to catch up. But Red Bull have made a car which seems practically insurmountable. And George Russell reckons they're even faster than they are letting on, because this is the thing. If you're as fast as Red Bull, why would you run flat out? Now, what you might say, and what Christian Horner has been saying, is that the drivers have been pushing flat out, as they have. Certainly Jeddah, Baku, recently here in Miami, when there was a pretty good battle between Perez and Verstappen ongoing, they were obviously pushing hard, right? They were trying to get the most out of their tyres, trying to beat each other, and we saw in Baku especially, they were on the limit of what they could achieve, and their tyres were kind of giving up towards the end of the race, which meant that, the other drivers could actually keep pace with Red Bull despite being 20 seconds behind. The question is, though, are they turning their engines down? The only thing that can upset Red Bull's season is massive reliability woes, and when your two drivers are competing anyway on that level, and when you're already going to be 20 seconds ahead of your nearest rival anyway, why not turn the engines down? And as Russell says, that's where they are. Wasn't surprised at Red Bull's pace. They've got it easy at the moment. I wonder if they're even running full power. It's a shame for the sport. Kudos to what they've achieved. Hopefully we can chase them and catch them, right, and chase them down. But it's an interesting question from Russell, right? Are they actually running full power, Red Bull? Are they turning their engines down? Because I would say it's more likely than not that they probably are. If you look at their performance relative to their competition, their aerodynamics are so far ahead of everybody else. They don't need a crazy engine mode to achieve what they're achieving. Now, their straight line speed is outrageous, and you might think, well, surely they can't be turning their engines down if they're hitting 345, almost 350 kph in the race, which might well be a good argument, but their DRS effectiveness as it is phenomenal, and we believe the Honda, or the Red Bull, let's just say, ERS system, the battery, is the best of anyone on the grid. So in terms of energy deployment from the battery, plus the great DRS system, plus the great aero efficiency, it's possible they're reaching those speeds without having their engine absolutely maxed out. They might have 10, 15, 20 horsepower in reserve. We have no idea what this could be. Is it a tenth? Is it 2/10? Is it 3/10? Is it 0 seconds at all and they're running their engines flat out? But I doubt it, right? Because they've got no reason to. They're much better off turning their engines down, preserving those power units, ensuring they don't have a DNF related to it, and let their drivers battle it out regardless, because it's going to be a 1-2 anyway. I mean, we've seen the gaps from the lead driver to the rest of the grid over the last few races. This is the gap here, 26 seconds of Verstappen, who started P9, back to Alonso, the next fastest other car. Russell was 33 seconds back, and the gap so far this season, Bahrain I think was 38 seconds back to the nearest car, which was Alonso in P3 in the Aston Martin, and even there in the last 10 laps, they say they were managing a gearbox issue and had to slow the car down by a second. So they actually turned the engine down at the end of Bahrain and still would have finished 50 seconds ahead of their nearest rival. Jeddah, it was more like 20 seconds ahead. Australia was 0.1 seconds, but it finished under the safety car. That weekend, it probably would have been 10-15 if not for that circumstance. But so, okay, Red Bull weren't as good that weekend, but still a dominant victory margin. And since then, 20 seconds and now 26 seconds over their nearest rival. So they don't need their engine at maximum. And in terms of their average pace, right, Verstappen was basically half a second clear of Alonso. Similar story to Russell. So the last couple of races, the race pace gap has been roughly half a second, 5/10, which is a mega gap, of course, but that's what it's been. The first race was 7/10, so that's pretty much what it's been on average, right? Doesn't matter where this Red Bull goes, it's roughly half a second faster than the grid. And Russell says that they're sandbagging, right? They've got more in the tank if they wanted to unload that full engine power. And why would they not put a bit in reserve? They don't want to appear to be like unbelievably good. There is an advantage to be had for Red Bull to not win the races at a canter, which they're obviously doing, but winning the races by 20 seconds and winning the races by 40 seconds is a pretty big difference when it comes to the FIA potentially looking to make regulation changes down the line. So there are multiple reasons why Red Bull would be turning their engines down, and I'd be surprised if they aren't, to be honest, as I've just mentioned. Now, as I say, the DRS effectiveness, Verstappen was at 345 kph, Leclerc was at, 333 pretty much. Hamilton, I believe, got up to maybe 340-ish, 337, maybe with DRS, with a bit of a slipstream as well. So, Verstappen's obviously significantly faster, so you might make the argument, and maybe it's understandable, that, surely the Red Bull can't be that much faster if its engine's turned down a bit, which might be true. But as I say, how good their battery system is anyway, how good their DRS is, how slippery their car is in a straight line regardless, might mean that they might have some more power on the table, Red Bull, that they're not unlocking until they need it, when another team might catch up down the line. So tweet your thoughts in the comments below. I will say, though, fundamentally, it's on Ferrari and Mercedes here, because Aston Martin, they brought Dan Fallows in from Red Bull, and they've created the second best car on the grid right now. Aston Martin, you wouldn't have expected to be super competitive with Red Bull, and they're only half a second off. Ferrari and Mercedes are further back than that, so fundamentally it's on them to challenge and turn it around. But look at the gap here in terms of, well, driver standings, but also constructor standings. Red Bull are currently at 224. That's a 122-point gap to Aston Martin after just 5 races. That's on course to pretty much break the all-time constructors record in terms of championship winning margin by the halfway point of the season. So they could be at 1,000 points at the end of the year. Like, as it currently stands, they will be, but you would expect some interesting things to happen from now to the end of the year. But very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.